Welcome to Thrive in Design, a podcast about making money in beautiful interiors as it relates to product-based businesses in the interior design industry. Each week, we'll discuss innovative strategies on how to approach product development and design sales in a shifting market. I'm your host, Nicole Lachey Ben. Welcome back to another episode of the Thrive in Design podcast. Today, I am super excited to welcome Stacy Garcia to the show. An established leader in the world of design, Stacy is a successful serial entrepreneur and the founder of Libatex, a distinctive commercial textile supplier, and Stacy Garcia Design Studio, a product design and licensing firm. With her established brands, Stacy Garcia New York, Stacy Garcia Blue Label, Stay by Stacy Garcia, and Stacy Garcia Home, this internationally renowned designer has partnered with some of the world's leading manufacturers to create products that span from floor to ceiling for resorts, hotels, and homes all over the world. As a forecasting and design expert, Stacy serves as a chair holder of the Color Marketing Group, the International Association of Color Professionals. She was voted one of the 10 leading voices in the hospitality design industry and honored by ASID for design excellence. Her work has been featured in interior design, boutique design, luxe, architectural digest, and traditional home. Stacy also serves as the executive chair for NEWH's Martha's Mentor Program, a transformative 10-month initiative designed to connect aspiring professionals in the hospitality industry with experienced industry mentors. Let's dive into this conversation with Stacy Garcia. Welcome to the show, Stacy.
Thank you so much, Nicole. All right. Well, that was a really nice intro. So you're right. It did get me pumped up to have a combo. I'm like, who is that she's talking about?
Yes, that is you, the Stacy Garcia. And actually, before we get into the questions, I actually want to take a moment to share like a quick story with you that I actually hadn't told you before. So when I was in college, I was interning at this firm in downtown Syracuse. And I remember, like, of course, as all interns, you're charged to like organize the library. And I remember seeing your boxes in the library. I'm like, wow, who's this like Stacy Garcia lady? She has
That's
her
amazing.
own stuff in the library. Fast forward a few years, I was working at Core Seal and I started to sell your wall covering. And then fast forward to last year, I actually met you and you have become just like one of the most amazing like mentors and friends and most generous people that I've met in this industry. And I'm super excited to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you so much. And for the listeners who don't know the backstory, the other part of the backstory is Nicole and I are both Syracuse University
Yes, go
alumni.
Orange. Go
Yeah,
Orange.
so that was a connection, although I think I'm a few years older, but I'm not going to say by how many.
It's
But it's
okay.
that's such a cool backstory. I love that. And
Yeah.
no, I'm so excited to be connected with you and right
Yes.
back at you. I mean, I feel like regardless of age, we're all have something knowledge that we can share with each other. And you have also been a mentor and a good friend to me too. So I am
Awesome.
just so happy to be part of your tribe here of creative
Y-
entrepreneurs.
Yes, awesome. So let's dive into it. I always like to start by asking my guests a little bit about their journey in the industry. So share with me a part of your journey in the world of interior design and what inspired you to pursue the career path and like textiles, interiors, and all the things.
Yeah. So I actually was always an art kid. So I'll take you way, way back. There's and it's interesting because I'm a mom of four today. So I watch my children and sort of their various interests and how they're chasing those dreams and how their talents have evolved over time as they've kind of pursued their passions. And so I was one of those kids, I wasn't a science kid and I wasn't an athlete and I wasn't a dancer, but I was an art kid. So all of my extracurriculars were in art. And I was really fortunate to have parents who kind of hippies and encouraged me to go follow that passion and take it through university level. So I ended up at Syracuse studying as part of their visual and performing arts school something called surface pattern design. So I actually have a formal degree, and for those of you who are watching on video, you can see some of the patterns on my wall, pattern on my shirt. I'm a pattern girl. And I think part of that is it's just what I was attracted to. in college, seeing one of my sorority sisters, actually, it was originally computer science, or computer design, I guess it was called, major, but it was a lot of programming. And I went, for more fine art. So I dropped that after a semester. I saw one of my sorority sisters sitting and painting these like really fine patterns. And I'm like, what is that for? What class is that? Oh, no, it's a major. She said, it's not a class. And so I checked it out, and it was so much fun. And we learned how to design everything from wallpaper, to wrapping paper, carpets, dishware, really anywhere that you would put decorative pattern application. And it gave me a good basis to go out and kind of jumpstart, because you could sort of take it anywhere. And I was fortunate in college, like you said, you were interning and you were cleaning out the boxes, and you went, well, who's this Stacy Garcia? The way I even thought about even having my own brand is when I was in college, I interned for Ralph Lauren. So I had exposure very early on into this lifestyle brand and into the concept of licensing. And so I went really just to, get experience on my resume, and obviously, to try to hone my skills. But what I walked out of there with was this, I'm going to say ground level view, because I was cleaning out closets. Also, my first 2 weeks, I think I spent in their vintage textile closet, just folding and organizing, antiques for them. But it was the first time I ever heard the term licensee, and who is that, and why does their opinion matter? And, how does this company that's this global brand structure? And at the time, they were structured through primarily licensed deals. And so they had partners on everything from furniture to dinnerware, bedding, you name it, pillows. Every category had a separate company that was producing that piece for them. And then all of those different elements came together in the showroom. And so it was really cool to see how you had designers working on every category, but it all came to life in this lifestyle. It was home furnishing, so it was a twice a year update. And I mean, they did it like magic. Like they wanted to transport the buyer, where you left Madison Avenue and you would open a door and you would walk into Ireland and, enter the Irish cottage. So, for me, it was a great basis of exposure into licensing, into design, into lifestyle, all of it. And it really kind of sparked where I saw my career eventually, what I would aspire to do. So
Yeah,
that's
and now
kind of the
you're doing
backstory.
it. And now you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, one day at a time,
Yeah, of
I'm out
course.
there, doing my own version of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so now, fast forward to now, you have built many successful brands under your name. Walk us through the process of creating and growing Libatex and Stacy Garcia Design Studio from the ground up.
Yeah. So I'm fortunate that not only were my parents hippies, but also that I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So I grew up in a home where it was almost not if I was going to start my own business, but when I was going to start my own business. And nobody in my family, and it's sort of the joke that I have with my siblings who are also entrepreneurs, but it's always sort of been each man for himself. And, in the best way possible. The bad news is no one has a government pension and we're all responsible for our own health insurance. But the good news is it's created a culture in our family of, sort of the sky's the limit, and there's no fear about what happens. We all sort of have that belief that we have what it takes to do this, to go out and build something and create value out of nothing. And because you're doing it yourself at this point, you have an idea, and to turn that idea into a business where you're able to get that first check, that first client, it's like, there is nothing like that feeling. And
Exactly.
I've coached lots of people over the years to say, when you make that leap to go off on your own, you just need one. Like, you need one paying client and you're in business.
Yep.
That's it. You never look back. And I remember, even through ups and downs, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly having to reinvent, during new markets, new landscapes, whether that's a pandemic or, I don't know, market meltdown, something like that. The market's dynamic. And so you're always sort of reinventing. And I remember the advice my father gave me, I was probably 9 years into Libatex, and I'll give you that backstory, but 2008 happened. And so I had, a small team of people, and the market crashed, as many people who are listening will remember. And we were servicing the hospitality industry, and everything was put on hold because it was the real estate collapse, and hotels are real estate assets. And so it very much impacted our business along with the rest of the economy. And there was no PPP money, there was no government bailout except for a couple of the banks. Nobody was giving small business money. So you had to navigate and figure out how you were going to survive this thing. And it was scary. I mean, I remember meeting with our accountant, I would say, okay, how much money do I have left? Like, when do I have to fire people? And she'd go, you're good for 6 weeks. Okay, let's not talk about it for 6 weeks. And we would just go increment by increment. And in those moments where I was like the most scared, my father sat me down and he said, listen, as a small business owner and as the founder of this company, as long as, even if you had to let everybody go, which I know is not in your heart, I know that is not what you want to do, but your worst case scenario today is if you had to let everybody go and you were the one who was making the sales and putting the production orders through and shipping the goods and wearing every hat, you would still have a business. So the only time the business ceases to exist is when you decide that you're ready to call it quits. And otherwise, you are the engine behind that thing. And, we're both believers, and the grace of God is the engine behind that thing. And so it was one of those where I was like, okay, you know what? Because I think that was like the panic of like, what if my business goes under? And he was like, no, as long as you keep pushing, you're the only one who gets to say it's done. Like you're the one who has to tap out. And I was like, wow, that's really good advice. And that really has given me a lot of confidence over the years.
Right. So you navigated 2008, a global pandemic.
Oh yeah.
And who else, and probably many other challenges. Like, I guess, how did you get to this point where you have all of these brands, all of these licensing deals? Like, was there one or two things that you believe like propelled you forward?
Yeah, I mean, first I'll take you back to the beginning a little bit too, because I know I kind of jumped 9 years in with this, coming from that family of entrepreneurs. And, my backstory is my dream originally was to do licensing. So like I said, I was exposed to this concept at Ralph Lauren. I was a senior designer at that point. So I got my first job after Ralph, worked in New York City in a textile building. So there was two main textile buildings on Fifth Avenue at the time. I took a job at one of them. And the easy thing was, then when you wanted to take a new job, you'd just like float your resume up a few floors and you'd move a few floors up. And I literally didn't change buildings. I just went 3 floors up for my next job. That job was for a company that was one of the larger textile converters, and I got hired as their designer in hospitality. So that was the first time I even learned about hospitality. And I was there doing custom work for them, styling all of their collections, working with outside freelancers, painting some of it myself, doing their color work, and creating the collections that were going to go out to market. And I was always very ambitious. So I wanted to know as much as I could about how the industry worked. And I was volunteering to travel with the reps. I wanted to get feedback. I wanted to hear what the market had to say about the collections before I would go and pitch them to the owner. And so I started doing sales calls and I started traveling and just learning so much about the industry. My dream was to eventually create my own collection and license it to a company because I had enough knowledge of this concept of licensing to do that. And for those of you listening who don't know what licensing means, it's basically where instead of selling your art or design or intellectual property, you loan it to another company and they pay you royalties on it. And then at the end of that relationship, you are still the owner of that intellectual property. So it's different than just you can be an artist that sells your work. I wanted to own my work and kind of have skin in the game on the success of the sales. And so that's the major differential with sales and licensing. But that was my dream, was to create my own textile collection and license it to anybody. It didn't really matter who it was. I just wanted the Stacy Garcia collection. And so, about 5 years in, I started to work on what that collection might look like and played with developing that out. and I got pregnant with my first son. And so I kind of knew, all right, this felt like the right timing. I know that sounds crazy because
Yeah.
most people would be like, oh, I'm going to have a child. I better make sure I have a solid job. We went the opposite. So I was married. We bought a townhouse with like, basically every penny we had saved. We bought our first home so that the baby wouldn't have to live in a drawer. We were living in like a tiny walk up in Manhattan, and took the leap, moved out of the city. And my husband had a job that he was miserable in, like literally sick. And when I say this, he was working on Rikers Island. He is like this
Oh my
soft-spoken
gosh.
accountant. He is like the definition of a gentleman.
Yeah.
And they were checking under his car every day to make sure that there was no inmate like hanging off the bottom of it. And that it was
That
the
is too
worst job he
much.
could have taken. Like, he just wanted to like count beans, and he was sent over. It was just terrible. And I remember saying to him, I'm not going to lose you. Like, I feel like you are so stressed that it's not healthy.
Hmm.
So you need to, I don't care if you don't have a job, you need to leave. It's
Yeah.
just, this is not working. And so I was pregnant and he left, and then he
Wow.
had no job. And then I gave birth and I said to him, I'm not going, I don't want to go back. I want
Oh
to
my
start my own
gosh.
business. So, and now he's an accountant. So he puts together the budget for us. Like, our mortgage is this, and the diapers cost this, and the food costs this, and here's all the expenses. And I said to him, where's the income?
Right. We have all of these like
All of these costs.
outbound
I'm like,
costs.
there's no top line. Like, there's supposed to be an income line. He's like, I'm like, so put a big, we joked like there was a big goose egg. There was a big zero at the top. And, it was, okay, we got to figure this out. Like, it's now or never. And so rather than lean into, the safety and comfort of a job with health insurance, it was like, all right, I sent letters to everyone I knew, seeing if I could do freelance work while I pitched out this collection to the marketplace.
Yeah.
And, took it around, my first textile collection, knocked on every door that I knew of. And I heard so many no's, and I was like so discouraged. And my husband was finally like, well, why do you need these companies? I mean, why do you need to license? Why can't you just create your own textile line? How come it has
Hmm.
to be through someone else? And so much of it is mindset. And I know we hear that now, it's everybody
Yeah.
posts on TikTok and Instagram on your mindset and all of that stuff. But the truth was, that was a major thing for me. It wasn't whether or not I wanted to start my own business. I thought the business I wanted to start was licensing. Like, I had a
Right.
safety net with that. I can design great product. Let me
And
go
have
find
someone
someone
else
else
to
to
do it.
manufacture it, and I'll make money on the spread. And he was like, but you're not getting the yes that you are looking for. And again, what is stopping you? Like, that was
Exactly.
like his mantra. What is stopping you from just creating the textile line?
Yeah.
And I was every excuse, which was really fear,
Yeah.
right? I
Hmm.
don't have a business background. Where are we going to get the money? They
Yeah.
have, the know-how, they have the mill relationships, they
Yeah.
have sales forces. It was
Setting
like,
your
I'm
own
putting
limitations.
all of my limitations of like, well, the company I had worked for was, I don't know, $150 million company at the time, all of these years ago. I'm looking at these massive businesses and going, well, how could I possibly compete? And where's the money going to come from and all this stuff? And
Yeah.
we first kind of thought about going to the SBA, and then we went to the bank that, held our mortgage, and said, listen, we're looking for a business loan, here's what we're thinking. And he pulled us aside and he said, look, we don't loan against ideas. Like, you have to have a legitimate business, we don't loan against ideas. He goes, but I can see that you have equity in your home because
Right.
from what you owe on the mortgage. He said, take out a home equity line. We're not going to ask you whether or not you used it to renovate your kitchen. You can use it for whatever you want. You just got to pay it back. If you don't, we'll take your house.
Oh my
And
gosh. The
yeah, and
risk.
the risk, I know. And I looked at my husband, he was like, let's do it. Like, what do we have to lose at this point? Our parents will take us in. Like, he's like, we won't live on the street,
Yeah.
we'll lose our house. And I was like, let me tell you, there's nothing more motivating in the world than the risk of having to move in with your in-laws when you're, it's
With a
like,
brand new baby at
with a
that,
brand no, it's
all
like,
of
I
those
love them,
dynamics.
but I don't want to live with them. So I don't think I've ever hustled more in my life. I didn't sleep for 2 years. I was so afraid, like, if I ruin this, I'm going to lose our house.
Right.
And but I mean, 25 years later,
It worked
it worked
out.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, it was worth the risk.
Yeah, and just like stopping on that entrepreneurship part of just like getting all of those no's. I feel like sometimes people will think of entrepreneurship and see the end result and think, "Oh, it was so easy. She probably had all these yeses and got her foot in the door, whatever." I can totally relate to that. Like initially, I knew that I wanted my job to be a design strategist. I was like, I want to go into a company, whether that's interior design related or not, do research, come up with the insights, do the go-to-market strategy, do all the branding, marketing, all these things, apply for all of these jobs. And they were like, no, 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 no.
Right.
Even the
Yeah.
potential clients, they're like, I don't know. No, no, no.
Yep.
But you just have to like keep going, keep up with that grit until like literally the vision that you have in your mind comes to pass. And like not giving up is so important. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that note, two points that I want to make that were so helpful to me and continue to be helpful to me. One is that, and this came from a coach of mine, Heidi, so I'll give Heidi the shout out here, but when she said, if it's being, I'm just trying to think, hang on. All right, this is where we gotta cut it up, but it's like if it's not blessed, it's blocked, like something like that. It's like, I'm just trying to think how she says it. Let it be blessed or blocked. And it's the idea that if you're hearing the no's and it's being blocked, that you have to trust that God is blocking it for a reason. Like
Mm-hmm.
bless it or block it,
Mm-hmm.
and not to be so attached to the blessing. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it's like you have it in your head, you have it in your head. But sometimes God or the universe or whatever it is that you call that bigger energy has a plan that we can't fathom.
Right.
We can't see it.
Yeah.
We think too small.
Yeah.
And so we get fixated on the no, and oh, I'm not going to keep going. I'm not going to keep going. But it's like almost you treat those no's like it's being blocked for a reason. And if you can surrender to that and not give up, just keep going, then at some point the yes is going to happen, and it's going to be the right yes.
Yeah. The right
You
door will
know,
open
the
based
right
on
one
what you
is going
said.
to open. And the other one, that I would say to myself over and over again when I was first getting started trying to pitch, every no gets me closer to a yes. So that
Yeah.
became like a mantra of mine. Every no gets me closer to a yes. And it would be like a challenge to myself where I would like high five myself if I got a no. I got a no, I got another no. Okay. Like I'm one more step closer to my yes. Like I knew it
Exactly.
was coming, and I kept saying there's a statistic in this, right? I don't know if it's every 10 calls lead to a yes. I don't know if it's every 50 calls lead to a yes. It might be every 200 calls lead me to a yes. I'm never going to know that stat if I give up. At some
Yeah.
point, I'm going to get my yes, and then I'll have a baseline statistic to know how many calls I need to make before I get my next client or my next opportunity. And so it became a game that I played with myself.
Exactly. I love that. All about the consistency, not giving up, and all the
Yeah.
things. So let's go over to your expertise in like forecasting and design. So, as a forecasting and design expert, where do you draw your inspiration and information from when predicting trends in the industry?
So that's a great question. I'm going to give a shout out to Color Marketing Group. And if you're interested in that, it's Color Marketing. I think it's colormarketinggroup.org or colormarketing.org. And it's an international color forecasting association. And I've been a member for well over 20 years. I'm a shareholder of that organization. And basically, what we do through that is we share information, which is wild, right? Because you're sitting in groups with potential competitors, you're sitting in groups with people up and down the supply chain. I've had been part of forecasting groups where it's people who are doing the chemicals that are going into the paint colorants, people who are and it's consumer and commercial, so it's not just commercial product. Like people from Kimberly Clark have been at meetings, Crayola crayons, cosmetic companies, cars, like automotive sent people. It's amazing the companies that have a presence here who are sharing what we're knowing, the knowledge base on what's currently selling, where we see consumer preferences moving, and then sharing that with the group so that we can create as an entity, as a nonprofit, a forecast for our members. And so I've learned so much through that process and taken so much of that into my own practice, and then created our own, obviously, version of it, which for us also includes tremendous amount of travel. We're going out to different trade shows. I'm seeing what's happening, meeting with clients, really tracking our sales. We've got product now that's sold in 52 countries. So I have a great amount of intelligence that we get just from, our own sales. And part of that forecasting process is looking, it's not a crystal ball, so it's not an exact science. But after doing this for 20 plus years, what we've learned is that there are things that we call drivers. And those are things that sort of impact consumer preference. And they can be anything from economic drivers, political times that will make people prefer one color or one trend over another. It can be social climate that's happening. It can be environmental things that impact. We look at art and fashion. What's happening is sort of an early driver or early indicator of what's, where some trends are happening. And so we're really kind of looking over a holistic landscape at what might be influencing what consumers' desires are, right? Because ultimately, when we're creating product or we're creating interiors, we want to make sure that we're giving people what they're looking for, or giving them something that is a little bit unexpected, but still something that when they walk away from it, they're not like,
Yeah.
It's like you want to be like, oh, and
Yeah.
not, and there's a big difference, right? So my goal is always to sort of push a little bit. We want to lead through our partnerships and through our product, but not be so far out that we miss. And so that's always, the hardest balance is, what's the timing of collection development, and how do we make sure we're ahead enough, but not too far ahead. And so we're, we're looking at all of these different trends. And, I'll give you an example. And it's one from the interior side that we all lived with. We talked a little earlier about the crash of 2008. Well, if you look back over product market and color life cycle, that's right around when gray started to emerge. And so we'll see, many times when the economy is consumers will go one of two directions. So mostly consumers will go very safe.
Yeah.
They want to be safe with their purchasing decisions. They're not taking a risk. They need this item to last longer than they might want it to.
Right.
And so they're going to make safe purchases from a color palette perspective. And gray becomes a really easy neutral, right? It's like, it's a classic color. It's the perfect shade between white and black. It kind of goes with everything. We were on that cool gray ride for a really long time. And gray had been out since the 80s. Like the last time we saw gray in the palette was in the 80s, and it was gone. And then all of a sudden it comes from this economic downturn and it stays forever. It felt like it was never leaving. So I'm happy to report that we're really finally seeing a shift out of gray, and we're seeing that shift into more taupey colors. It's still the gray family, right?
Okay.
So consumers may
Taupe
still
is
be
back?
typing in gray, but taupes are coming back strong. Beiges, warm sand colors coming back strong.
Okay.
And then, part of my forecast is we're going to see gray kind of fall off a cliff at some point soon. What we've been encouraging our partners to do is what we call bridging for the, whether it's for the interior designer or the end consumer, because people have invested into a lot of gray. They have gray tile. That's not leaving the building. They have gray kitchens. That's not leaving the building. So we need to give them a way to like sprinkle a little accent and have it look intentional. So that's been, but it's an example of where an economic driver impacts color.
Yeah, and that just makes me think about just like everything that is happening in the world. I was talking to a friend the other day. I'm like, the headlines over the last couple of days have been crazy. And then I was like, oh, actually, no, the last couple of weeks. And then I said, actually, the last couple of years.
Yeah, like our entire life has been.
Yeah,
there's always something crazy.
That's been kind of crazy between like pandemic and wars and floods and all types of things.
Yeah.
So as we see like, major headlines that are happening all over the world, how do you see color evolving outside of the taupes and the sand colors? How do you see color evolving and then impacting the product development, especially for interior products?
Yeah, well, one of the things we do, and this is a cheat, so I'll share it with everybody, is when you identify one trend, right? Like we're talking about still the neutral palette, safe colors going into the warm neutrals, that makes still people feel safe, and neutrals can evolve as we're seeing it. but there's always something we call a counter trend. So if you spot that trend of like, hey, neutrals are everywhere, what's the opposite of that? The counter trend is the opposite. They're usually both true at the same time. And so the counter trend would be like hypercolor. And we're seeing that too. This very optimistic palette, this kind of counterculture. You're wearing a bright shirt today.
Absolutely.
It's like we want to feel like happy and optimistic. How do we do that? Well, whether it's fashion or home fashion or hotel interiors or restaurant design, brights are coming back too. And so we're seeing that in a couple of different ways, but one of them is, a little bit of that, again, hyper optimistic. Some of it's inspired by what we're seeing in the digital realm. So kind of bringing those digital palettes into reality. And so it's sort of easier. It's one of the cheats that we always talk about. All right, you see a trend, what's the counter to that? You can almost money in the bank that there's both exist at the same time.
Okay.
Again, an example of this one, this goes back, a long time ago, but I remember the Cooper car, which is that, Cooper Mini,
yeah.
it's that tiny little car, and the Humvee both came out into the market at the same time. This was like, a while ago, but it was like, well, are tiny cars in or are humongous cars in? Guess what?
Yeah,
They're both
they're
in.
both.
Correct. Right. So, it was, you can sort of usually spot it like that. And then we've got some really exciting trends that are on our forecast for 2025. So we're usually working on trends 2 years out. We're going to be ready to, and when we do that, it's because we're working with our licensed partners on their collections at least 12 months, if not longer than that, in advance before they hit market. So we need to make sure we're really ahead of the curve. And then we will bring our forecast to the market in advance of when we're launching that product. So we have some really exciting trends that we've seen coming across the landscape. And some of it is an evolution. So I like to say, with trend forecasting, when you're looking and you want validation, if you're starting a new interior design project or you're starting a new product development cycle, whatever your business is, knowing what colors are happening, knowing what design trends are happening are important because it helps you make sure that you can bring product to market or bring an experience to market that's going to generate the most value to that consumer, right? It's like we said, we're hitting it where it's like, oh, not ooh. And so, we want to make sure that, but what we're excited to be showcasing is some things that are an evolution. And so one of the things I say when you're looking at trends, you want to make sure that you're looking for something that's evolving over time, that's happening in different segments of the market. Maybe you're seeing it in fashion, but you're also seeing it in art, or we're seeing it in some of the European countries usually are ahead of the curve with their interior design products. So we're seeing it in different areas. And then we will call it a trend versus like, oh, I saw this on TikTok. They're calling it a TikTok trend. Well, that's code word for fad. That's like, if you see it on TikTok, it's probably not going to live very long. So that would be like, stay away from that. Okay.
Right. Those TikTok trends last a week or less, and it's on to the next thing. We want something that has a little bit longevity when it comes to like product development.
Yes. And, that would be how I would distinguish a fad versus a trend. And so it's really getting our language down. The problem is everybody's calling it a TikTok trend. So then I'll have people, I don't want to follow the trends. No, you don't want to follow the fads.
The fads, yeah.
Right. So we made it a better word.
Yeah, I'm going to call that out in our marketing for this episode: fad versus trend, and the definitions of each, which ones you should be paying attention to, for sure.
Exactly.
All right. And I have a good question for you. And I know, Stacy, we've been talking about licensing. I have a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but I've definitely over the last 12 months, a lot more people have been coming to me like, hey, you help with, interior product companies and their go-to-market strategy. I actually am an artist or designer, and I've been thinking about licensing. And I have no knowledge on this, but I feel like you are the licensing guru and expert. So what advice would you give to an artist or designer that's looking to successfully secure and maintain licensing deals?
Okay, that's well, there's probably an entire course that I need to write.
60 seconds, and then we can do the course.
Exactly. I know. I think the first thing would be to understand what your rights are to your intellectual property and make the decision that you don't want to sell your art, because I've known lots of artists who have created amazing careers selling their art. So there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want people to feel like, oh, that's the wrong way. It's not. It's one option. And the other, a different option is licensing. And so for me, licensing has been a good place to build a career because I can leverage a single piece of art in different categories. So, for me, the first place to start as an artist or designer, as you're creating your intellectual property, would be, research, maybe get a lawyer, but start to copyright your things so that you have the protections in place. So that would kind of be a good place to start, is to make sure that if it's a trademark, your brand, you're trademarking it. If it's a two-dimensional work or written content, you're copywriting it. If it's a three-dimensional piece that's patentable, you patent it. And so you're going to want to put some protections in place for yourself. And then don't overthink it after that. I think at that point, you start to decide, where do you think your product fits? And like we talked about earlier in this episode, make a list, send some emails. It is easier today to connect than ever. I mean, I had to work literally like a Yellow Pages phone book.
Oh my gosh.
You could work LinkedIn,
Exactly.
and you just boom, 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 and you send an intro and see if there's interest in licensing. So that's, a great way to start. Just nothing happens till something gets sold. So you just go, like we said, you need that first client and you're in business.
Yes. Listen, that was a great intro in 60 seconds to licensing. I can't wait for you to go above and beyond so I can refer people to a future course that you'll create.
Yes. Well,
Sure.
in the meantime, I do want to kind of do a shout for anybody who is just kind of going back to the forecasting piece, right? What the colors are going to be, what's that forecast going to be? While I'm building out a course on licensing, over the next, kicking off actually in September in Chicago and running through March, is the Stacy Garcia Trend Tour.
Excellent.
That's going to be done in partnership with NEWH, which for those of you, Network of Executive Women in Hospitality. And we're going to be traveling to 12 cities all over the country. And I'm going to be bringing my trend forecast to various chapters of NEWH. I'm so excited. So follow me for more information on that. And we're going to have a section of our website so that you can see what the cities are. And we want to just make it fun. It's really a celebration of color. It's a celebration of design. And, it's meant to inspire and educate the design community on what is forecasting. Like you said, the difference between a fad and a trend. What are my forecasts? What colors do I see? Because there is nothing worse as an interior designer than being nervous that what you're presenting to your client is going to be a fad. And when you do the ribbon cutting, it's going to look old. So, I'm out there trying to make sure that you feel empowered, that your color palettes, your choices, your design direction are on trend, not on fad, and that it's going to have a long life cycle and look amazing until your next PIP renovation.
Yes, and I cannot wait. I'll be at the DC location for this trend tour. It's going to be so much fun.
Good.
All right, to wrap it up, Stacey, lastly, I know you have this trend tour that's coming up, but what's next for you and your brands in the coming decade? Are there any exciting projects, plans that you have on the horizon?
I know. That's a good question. It's funny. I'm like, I do my 3-year roadmap, and I had a hard time. I used to try to do the 10-year, and it felt overwhelming to me. So my grace to myself has been kind of that 3-year roadmap.
Okay.
So what's on the horizon next? We're actually celebrating 20 years as a design studio. So we're going to be doing a whole new website, a rebrand, a relaunch. We have some new exciting partnerships that we are in works with that I can't announce yet, but some of them are in hospitality, some of them are on the residential side of the business. And so we're really going to be growing out the manufacturers that we're working with. We have exciting new flooring collections that we're going to be launching in November with signature flooring. So that's going to be a holistic flooring line, everything from hard surface to carpet tile, broadloom, and public space. So really excited about that partnership. And honestly, we were joking with my husband. I said, I'm going 4 years out on this one. My youngest will be in college in 4 years, and I want an RV humming in the driveway right after we kiss her goodbye, because my plan is to hit the road for a year and go get inspiration and travel and visit our clients and just, be on the road. I love travel. It fills my soul. So, that is part of the vision I have for myself, and, to just keep growing and inspiring my team and hopefully giving back to this amazing community that's been so generous to me and my studio.
Yes. Well, that is amazing. I cannot wait to see all of those things come to fruition and to just like celebrate along the way, along the journey from here on out. Thank you so much for sharing everything from your start at Syracuse, from doing computer science. Like, who would have thought? To
Not for
surface
me.
pattern, to your internship experience, of really like taking that leap of faith and following your heart, thankfully with a wonderful supportive partner who was there to push you every step of the way. And now you've, come to build this amazing brand, or really multiple brands under your name. And I'm just amazed, and I'm sure that my listeners will be inspired. So thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me here.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us this week on Thrive in Design. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Thrive in Design. And for more strategies on how your product company can innovate in the interior design industry, head to training.thriveindesign.co. As always, subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave us a review so we can continue to create captivating content. See you next week.